At 7 p.m. on 28 November 2004, a quiet Highland evening in the Scottish town of Nairn fractured in an instant. A man, ordinary in every outward detail, stood at the doorstep of a family home on Crescent Road. The air was cold, still, unremarkable. Then came the knock. Another man answered, and without preamble, the visitor spoke one name, a name that would soon vanish from the world forever: Alistair Wilson. Moments later, Alistair appeared on the doorstep, his gaze fixed on a small blue envelope resting in his hand, the only thing he received before events were set in irreversible motion. 3 shots echoed through the street. A life extinguished. No shout, no chase, just silence. In an ordinary Scottish town, a father, husband, and banker fell to the pavement, and his killer simply walked away. What was inside that envelope? Why did the man return to the door after receiving it? No answers came. Not immediately. Not ever. A name scrawled across a plain piece of paper, Paul, became one of the few clues in a case that refused to make sense. Decades of investigation have followed, thousands of pages of statements, tens of thousands of documents reviewed. New leads have surfaced, theories have formed, yet no one has ever been charged with this crime. In 2024, a renewed, full reinvestigation, Operation Sabine, was ordered by Scotland's senior law officer, breathing fresh life into the search for truth. But here's the question that still haunts every step forward. Why did someone come to his door and kill him? Before that evening in 2004, Alistair Wilson was a man whose life looked familiar and ordinary, the kind of life many of us know intimately. At 30 years old, he was a business manager at the local Bank of Scotland branch in Nairn, a quiet coastal town in the Scottish Highlands. He lived on Crescent Road with his wife, Veronica, their 2 young sons, and Veronica's father in the top-floor flat above them. By all accounts, Alistair's days ran on the steady rhythms of family life. Mornings began with breakfast around the kitchen table, laughter between sips of tea, and brief conversations about the day ahead. He dropped his children at school, then walked a few minutes to his office, exchanging greetings with neighbors who knew him as a friendly figure in the community. Weekends were spent with his family, reading stories, playing games, and teaching his kids about the world beyond their doorstep. On the evening of Sunday, November 28, 2004, the day unfolded like so many others before it. Around 6:30 p.m., Alistair helped with the bedtime routine, brushing hair, tucking in sheets, softly reading as his sons giggled and squirmed under warm blankets. There was no alarm, no hint that anything out of the ordinary was approaching. As dusk settled across Nairn, the family's living room was calm, its quiet punctuated only by the hum of daily life. Alistair stepped outside for a moment of fresh air, intent on answering the doorbell that had just sounded. His wife had already opened the front door. When she called his name, he made his way downstairs. In that final walk from the comfort of his home toward the porch light, he carried nothing with him but a gentle familiarity, the trust of a man returning to a life he loved. Across the span of minutes that should have marked endearment and routine, everything changed. At about 7 p.m., a stranger stood on the doorstep. Alistair approached. A brief exchange took place. He was handed a blue envelope with the name Paul scratched on its front, a detail that, to this day, haunts the investigators and the family alike. Moments later, everything we knew about this ordinary life collapsed into uncertainty. In the space of a handful of minutes, a family's laughter and tenderness were replaced with unanswered questions. The routine that had once brought peace became a haunting marker of a life cut short. And as the clock ticked past 7 p.m. that night, the world around Crescent Road shifted forever, from comfort to mystery, from love to loss. When the first emergency call went out from Crescent Road in Nairn on the night of 28 November 2004, the local police response was immediate. Officers swarmed the quiet street, sealing off roads, interviewing startled neighbors, and scouring every inch of the scene for clues. Within hours, specialists were brought in to comb the crime scene with meticulous care. Detectives worked through the night, fueled by the belief that someone, somewhere, must hold a fragment of the truth. At the heart of their inquiries were two puzzles that defied logic. A briefcase abandoned near the scene yielded nothing of obvious importance, and the blue envelope handed to Alistair moments before the gunshots, marked with the name Paul, remained just as confounding. Why would a stranger deliver a seemingly meaningless note only to take it back moments later after killing the man it was addressed to? These unexplained details ignited early optimism. If there was a message, perhaps it would lead detectives closer to the truth. In the weeks that followed, the scale of the investigation became clear. Dozens of officers worked around the clock. Thousands of statements were taken from residents, visitors, and even casual passersby who might have noticed something unusual. The murder weapon, a rare 1930s Heinel Sewell pocket pistol, was found 10 days later in a nearby drain, but it yielded no fingerprints or DNA that could be traced to a suspect. In its earliest stages, the case seemed poised for rapid breakthroughs. Leads flowed in from all corners. Every sighting of a stranger on a bus, every odd-looking face near Crescent Road that night, and every fragment of conversation about the night's events became a thread investigators were determined to follow. Yet, as hours turned into days, and days into weeks, the threads began to fray. Witness accounts clashed. One person described the man on the doorstep as stocky and medium height, while another insisted he appeared taller and leaner. Small contradictions like these multiplied, and the picture of the killer grew murkier rather than clearer. Detectives chased leads across the Highlands and beyond, questioning hotel patrons about conversations overheard days before the murder, retracing Alistair's steps through town, and combing through every scrap of physical evidence they could find. But each promising trail ended in confusion or contradiction. Over time, the urgency that defined those first tense days began to ebb, replaced with frustration, the kind that creeps in when every clue seems to fade just as hope takes shape. And then the lead slowly stopped. After the first surge of interviews, search warrants, and forensic work, the momentum that once drove the investigation began to fade. The streets of Nairn, once rattled by an inexplicable act of violence, slowly returned to their quiet rhythms. Yet beneath that everyday calm, something had changed forever. As months turned into years, the questions became heavier than the answers. Alistair's family fought for every scrap of information they could find, writing letters to authorities, granting interviews, and appealing publicly for fresh leads. Each attempt to reignite interest brought a momentary spark of hope, followed by the familiar ache of disappointment when no breakthrough came. The case that once commanded intense police attention was now a quiet file on a shelf. In the years that followed, the town felt different. People who once waved hello began locking doors on chilly evenings. Neighbors glanced at unfamiliar faces with unease. The sense of security that had defined the Highlands was eroded, not by violence repeating itself, but by the uncertainty that something like it could happen in a place where trust once felt guaranteed. For Alistair's family, each birthday, each anniversary, became another reminder of an absence that the world had failed to fill. The grief was not just in mourning his death, it was in enduring the silence that followed. Every unanswered question was like a step taken in darkness. Behind closed doors, detectives reviewed old files. They revisited witness statements. They analyzed every shred of evidence available. But with time, memories blurred. Footsteps that once seemed promising as leads faded into ambiguity. Faces once thought familiar in CCTV footage dissolved into obscurity. The threads that at once offered hope now tangled into uncertainty. The family refused to give up. They welcomed renewed attention whenever it came. Every public appeal, every documentary, every police message begging for new information. But each plea carried the same hollow echo. Nothing yet. The pain of waiting stretched longer with each passing year. And so, the case settled into an uneasy quiet, a kind of stillness that offered no peace, only questions. Alistair's family continued to live with the uncertainty, knowing the truth remained just out of reach. Even after more than 2 decades, investigators and the public alike struggle with the same haunting question. Why was Alistair Wilson killed? With no arrest and no confirmed motive, a web of theories has formed, each plausible, each incomplete, each leaving something unresolved. One of the earliest ideas considered by those following the case was whether Alistair's work could have made him a target. As a business manager at the Bank of Scotland, he oversaw financial affairs in the community, but nothing in his record ever suggested wrongdoing, disputes, or entanglements that would spark retaliation. Despite speculation in some unofficial circles that his role might have intersected with high-profile financial troubles elsewhere, there is no evidence tying Alistair's banking work to his murder. Another theory that surfaced in the years after the attack was the notion that the attack was the work of a professional hitman, a calculated execution rather than a spontaneous act of violence. The style of killing, with a small and unusual pistol used at close range, did lead some observers to consider this angle early on. But if a professional were involved, investigators have never unearthed any connection to organized crime groups or evidence linking the shooting to criminal networks. Police have explicitly dismissed involvement from international paramilitary groups in public statements. As time passed and traditional motives failed to hold weight, another line of inquiry emerged, one tied not to global crime, but to a personal dispute in Alistair's own neighborhood. In 2022, Police Scotland publicly suggested that the most likely motive might have originated from a planning complaint Alistair lodged against the construction of a large decking area outside the Havelock Hotel, right across the street from his home. He had objected in writing to the local council, expressing concerns about noise and litter affecting his family life. Detectives learned that conversations about this objection were taking place in the hotel's bar in the days before the murder, giving rise to the possibility that someone connected to the dispute had taken offense and, in an extreme turn, retaliated. Yet even this theory does not provide easy answers. The hotel owner has never been named a suspect, and no one linked to the planning row has been charged. If a disgruntled local was involved, investigators have found no definitive proof connecting them to the killing. The idea has reignited the investigation, but it remains just one possibility among many, plausible but incomplete. Other explanations have been floated in unofficial commentary, including mistargeting due to the mysterious envelope marked Paul, unusual interpretations of the enigmatic note, and even unfounded claims linking the incident to external conflicts. None of these ideas fit cleanly with the facts. The envelope itself has never yielded additional evidence, and the significance of the name Paul remains a mystery. Despite renewed investigation efforts, including police appeals, international witness interviews, and fresh reviews of archived evidence, every theory seems to fall short of a complete explanation. There are pieces that tease at a deeper truth: the unusual weapon used, the timing of the planning objection, even the empty envelope handed to Alistair before he was killed. But none have formed a coherent narrative that fully explains why this ordinary family man was targeted in such a calculated moment on his own doorstep. And so, the questions persist. Was it a dispute taken too far? A message left unread? A life intersecting with forces no one ever expected? Each theory raises another question, and another, a never-ending thread that leads deeper into uncertainty rather than resolution. For Alistair's family, the passage of time has not brought peace. It has stretched the pain into an unending present. 2 decades after that final evening on Crescent Road, they still wake to the same unanswered question: why? No resolution, no trial, just a persistent emptiness that refuses to be filled. Police Scotland now has Operation Sabine underway, revisiting more than 10,000 documents and thousands of witness statements, searching for fresh angles with modern technology, but the outcome is still uncertain. Alistair's wife, Veronica, and their sons have endured a lifetime of uncertainty in a single instant of violence. Life goes on around them, seasons change, birthdays come and go, communities evolve, but their world remains frozen at the moment before the knock on the door. The absence of answers has become a constant companion, shaping their days with a reminder that justice has not yet arrived. The community that once knew Alistair as a friendly neighbor and devoted father carries its own echoes of that night. People speak in hushed tones about the shooting, even years later. In a town where everyone once felt safe walking its streets or greeting friends on an evening stroll, an undercurrent of anxiety lingers. Parents still tighten their children's coats before bedtime, aware that the ordinary can turn devastatingly unpredictable. Alistair was taken from his family while helping put his sons to bed, a scene so familiar to many households that it resonates deeply. That contrast between the warmth of routine and the suddenness of loss shows why this case continues to haunt those who know it. People remember the day not as history, but as a sudden rupture in what should have been just another Sunday evening. For those who live in Nairn and the surrounding highlands, the murder is not merely a cold case, it is a shared wound. Conversations still flicker back to the unanswered questions, the theories that could never be confirmed, and the feeling that someone, somewhere, might hold the missing piece. Each year that passes grows heavier with the weight of what remains unknown. In the quiet moments, the pauses between normal life, the silence speaks loudest. It is the silence of justice delayed, of evidence re-examined without breakthrough, and of a family that continues to hope against hope for the answers that might finally bring them some measure of peace. 2 decades after that final knock at the door in Nairn, the reinvestigation into Alistair Wilson's murder continues. In 2024, Scotland's senior law officer ordered a full review of the case, and detectives working under Operation Sabine began sifting through every file, every statement, and every piece of evidence ever collected. New technology, fresh forensic methods, and nearly 14,000 investigative steps are being re-examined in the hopes of finding a breakthrough. Yet after more than 20 years, the central mystery still stands. Who was the man that walked up to that doorstep, handed over an envelope, and walked away without leaving a trace? No arrest has ever been made. No motive has ever been confirmed. And the questions that began that night still linger, unanswered, unresolved, unfinished. Is it possible the killer remains unknown in plain sight? Could the name on the blue envelope hold the key that has been overlooked all this time? Or is this a case that simply defies explanation, one that will remain a puzzle until someone with the missing piece finally speaks up? What do you think really happened that evening? This story isn't just about evidence and theories. It's about memory, loss, and the way unanswered questions echo through lives and communities for years, decades, sometimes a lifetime. If you have a theory, a piece of insight, or a question that won't leave your mind, share it in the comments below. Could justice still be found? Is there someone out there who knows something that could break this case wide open? And if you want more deep dives into unsolved mysteries from around the world, make sure to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a new episode. Because some stories don't end, they wait.